Okay, welcome everybody. And this is, oh gosh, I don't even know what number we're on, 9 or 10. I don't know. This is the, I don't know, nth time that we've done this networking session, and I finally have a name for it. So we have decided to go with IDEA networking session, which stands for Instructional Designers and Educators Alliance. So thank you, Leslie. Yes, it is a great name. It's a great idea. And so what we are going to do today, we're going to welcome 3 new guest speakers who are instructional designers who at one time were educators, and they're going to share their stories about how they got into instructional design. So the first speaker will be Martin. Our second speaker will be Sabina. I did it wrong, sorry. And then the third speaker, well, it works, right? And our third speaker will be Erin. And after our speakers, I'll put everybody, actually you get to decide today which breakout room you go in. I'm gonna give you the choice to decide which breakout room you go in with which speaker. And one of your options, of course, can be me if you want to stay out here in the main room and just chat with me, that's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna put myself on mute, and I will hand it over to Martin, and he will share with us his story about getting into instructional design.
Yes, thank you very much. Martin Maynard here. I have a very fun route. I just love the route that I got to be an instructional designer, because I started as an English instructor at Indiana State University, and I kind of fell into the position. I know that sounds weird. My bachelor's degree is in anthropology, archaeology, and my master's is in English. But I actually got asked by the English department to apply because they'd seen some of my writing. And so they also wanted me to teach for them during the master's program. And so in our master's program, I took there were several different areas that my instructors were saying that nobody does anymore, and that's or nobody was focusing on, and that was technology in the classroom. They really wanted to get into technology in the classroom, but everybody either was afraid of it, or they just wanted to go with the status quo, and they didn't want to rock the boat. And I'm like, I'll definitely take on technology in the classroom. And so I started studying technology in the classroom and all the different theories as I was teaching. And it was fun because I got to include that in my teaching while I was studying it. And so I got to experiment. So there's probably about 300 students out there that just became my experimental group, and they loved it as well. They were completely comfortable with giving me feedback on what they liked and what they didn't like. And so what I started doing was I eventually got rid of textbooks altogether, and I did all of their homework as being just not reading, but going through with doing learning modules. And so I created through Captivate and Storyline, Articulate Storyline, just started making modules for them to go through, and so that they would get the material and then test out, and just absolutely loved it, and they loved it, and they were asking for more, and they just absolutely loved doing it, and they were learning. They were just learning, and coming to class every day. I had very few absences. I had very few students drop my class because they just enjoyed it, and they were just having a lot of fun with it. And their grades, I would explain something to them, and then they would go over interactive modules as their homework. And it instead of just that boring reading of the textbooks, and they just got so much out of it. And then after a while, I started to realize that I just really liked developing those learning modules. And so that's definitely what I did. And so literally my entire curriculum was just based off of those learning modules. And then as things happen, the university decided that they were going to go through and start cutting down the full-time faculty down to a lot of part-time faculty. And so I could kind of see the direction that we were going as educators. And so I was able to quit there and get a job based on what I'd been doing. I was developing transferable skills in the classroom that I was able to actually use those, develop a portfolio of my own, and land a trainer job. Now, this trainer job ended up being about I was doing onboarding is pretty much what it was, onboarding and orientation. And so after Monday, I had nothing to do. So Tuesdays through Friday, I was just walking around with a clipboard, making myself look busy. And but as I'm walking around, I realized that, you know, they did not have training on safety. They didn't have training on a lot of different things. And so I approached my manager and I said, hey, I've got this capability of doing this. You buy me the software, buy me a camera, I'll go around and I'll start developing, you know, safety training. I'll develop, you know, whatever. And that just snowballed. That snowballed into, you know, having huge, you know, like I think when I left there was 12 different programs that had been started in the training department that got developed throughout. And it was just I happened to be lucky to get that blank check just right off the bat to say, yeah, develop whatever you need to. And so I got to experiment doing that as well. And so it was almost just like a continuation of this great experiment. And so I just started learning more, reading more, talking to more people. And of course, LinkedIn was huge on assisting me on getting there. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to do, and the more I wanted to do, and the more I did, the more I wanted to learn more. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I tried getting back as an instructional designer back into education, into higher ed, and just realized that really was not me. You know, I was developing modules for so long, and then now I'm coming back and just being an LMS administrator. It just was not as creative as I wanted to be. And so I am now currently working in corporate training, developing video. Right now we're developing video-based training. And we are also on the side developing e-learning modules to go along with that, interactive activities, et cetera, to go along with that. And so that's kind of that a really kind of convoluted accidental ID route there.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Yeah, I can definitely, I definitely have that same experience of feeling like, well, I learned that, so what else can I learn? And oh, that was interesting, and what else can I learn? I think that's that creativity, and that curiosity that I think people in this field really thrive on, and that we love solving problems. Erin says, super relatable experience and journey, Martin. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. And it's really fun when you get the right book that you're just like, oh, wow, you know, and that now you've got like 20 new things to research,
Yeah.
you know, and you just got that one, you're like, oh, this is the Mecca book, you know?
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Sabina.
So my name is Sabina. I have been an instructional designer now for about 2 years. I actually started my career as an English teacher in high school, and I did that for 5 years and kind of felt myself growing stagnant. Like I wanted to continue to challenge myself, and I didn't feel like there were a whole lot of places I could go other than administration. And that was not the direction I wanted to go. And so doing what I think a lot of teachers who want to transition did, I kind of turned to Google, and I spent a lot of time kind of researching, like identifying what my aptitudes were and what that aligned with. And I kept coming back to instructional design. And I should kind of caveat too, this process took me a while. I'd say like 9 months. From like researching to like leaving the classroom. So I did a lot of research and determined that I needed to have a portfolio, which to me was something totally new because as an English teacher, that's not something I needed. So on my breaks and, time in the evenings and whatever, I spent my time developing that portfolio. Like Martin touched on, LinkedIn was a huge resource. Like I was shameless and I would like search instructional designer on LinkedIn, and I'd reach out to people who also had a similar background to me and ask them if I could pick their brain. Some people didn't respond and some did. And that was really, really helpful. Just figuring out like how people made that transition. And a lot of it was just redesigning my resume to meet the corporate lingo. I had the skills, the verbiage was different. And so I spent a lot of my time kind of in that transition period while I was teaching still, but kind of in the, in my off time, developing my resume, developing my portfolio, and then applying to jobs. And I was really, really fortunate. I live in the Bay Area, so there's a lot of industry here. But I was really fortunate. There's actually a company that contracts to a utility agency, and they like to hire ex-teachers. And so I happened to see that they were hiring, and I applied, and the company sounded like a great culture fit, but I was like, I've been rejected before, I'll probably be rejected again. And I just kind of, gave it a shot, and I ended up hearing back. And it was just all around, like, it felt like the right fit. And so I got in there, and I got in with the utility agency, and really loved what I did. Like, it felt like I was able to put all my skills to use, and I wasn't trying to also, deal with parents and deal with all the administrivia that also sometimes comes with teaching. And so I love that. And about 6 months into my role as a contractor there, they opened up a full-time position, and I applied and got the full-time position. And so I've been there now at this company for 2 years, 6 months as a contractor, and then like a year and a half as an instructional designer. And I mean, what I do with my roles, we really touch on everything. Like we do a lot of instructor-led trainings because it's a hands-on field, teaching utility workers how to do different tasks. With COVID, now we're doing a lot of web-based trainings, and then assessment building. Like I don't know if this is a proper term, but I would say like full stack instructional designer, really touching on everything that instructional designers do. And I love it. I have a 10-month-old at home, so I'm not there yet, but I actually want to go back and get my master's in instructional design. But I need to wait till he's in daycare, so I have the bandwidth to do that. So yeah, that's my kind of the short and sweet of my transition. There was a lot more that kind of went into that, just behind the scenes and learning the softwares and all of that. But that's how I made the jump.
Excellent. All right. I also feel you about not having the bandwidth until the kid would you say in daycare? Is that what you said?
Yes, that is what I said.
Oh, it's like a whole new world when you can like devote your mental energy to something else besides, is this child still alive? What do I need to do for this child to keep him alive?
Has he eaten? Has he had his diaper changed? I don't know.
Girl, I know. Know it. All right. Our next speaker is Erin. How you doing, Erin? Do you think you'll be okay?
You just let me know if it gets choppy. How about that?
How about that? Yeah, that sounds good. All right, I'm ready for you.
All right, well, thanks so much for the opportunity. It is fun to hear from other folks like Sabina and Martin, certainly some themes. And I actually ended up in aviation. So another company, like if you decide not to go down the instructional design road, another company that likes to hire teachers is actually Southwest Airlines, because who better in terms of temperament and ability to wrangle many bodies at once in a contained space, apparently. So just an idea if anybody decides not to go that direction. So I'll try and cover not the same things, but I do want to pull out a couple of themes that we're hearing already. Is certainly the ability to sort of inventory your transferable skills, like those companies that like to hire teachers, as Sabina said, and I think Martin said it as well. Spending a little bit of time as you're looking at your resume and your background, really thinking about, where are your interests, where are your own lifelong learning curiosities and creativity come out, is a great use of your time. And then it very naturally can lead to also an inventory of your existing skills that might be transferable. So when you do go for those stretch ID positions that maybe you don't have as much background in, and I would say a lot of the positions out there, they do kind of look like they're trying to hire for the kitchen sink, like so many jobs nowadays. Don't be too intimidated. Some of it is a little bit of tailoring your own narrative and storytelling, both for the interviews, but also just looking at that resume and that skill set that you have and bring to the table, and the sensibilities that I think people who end up in teaching bring with them and are inherently strong at in the power skills, AKA soft skills department, you have a lot of gifts at your disposal and arrows in your own quiver before you even really embark. We also heard the importance of networking, and I certainly had the same experience. I ended up teaching English in China. I moved to China in 2008 and was there off and on for the course of about 5 years. And so, of course, both as a language learner myself, I appreciate, and I think it makes you empathetic and sensitive to the world to go out and be a visible minority, be learning as an adult, sort of recognizing the cognitive load and things like that. But I too started looking at what are my jobs, or what am I going to do when I get back to the States, because I don't want to necessarily teach English as a foreign language anymore, or to speakers of other languages anymore. But I don't really want to go back to my previous career, which for me was politics. I am actually a recovering politico. So I worked in electoral politics. I worked in higher ed, which again, wonderful environment for sort of bringing you up to be conversant maybe for some of the politics that you might encounter rather in corporate learning and training and development environments. But I didn't want to go back to that. So I showed up and I gave back. I also networked on LinkedIn. I reached out to people, would you be interested in briefly informational interview or coffee or whatever, especially as I was preparing to return to the States. And I particularly reached out to people who were affiliated with the professional associations, like the local chapter of the Association for Talent Development, ATD. There's both a national organization and your community might have a local one as well. And then other allied fields, perhaps the HR organizations, professional development organizations, or organizational development OD organizations. We're lucky in the Seattle area to have quite a few of those. And just some other allied fields, coaches, they often do events. So I started reaching out to those folks, and then I kind of gathered a lot of political currency because I volunteered. I was looking for work. I didn't quite find work out of the gate. And that led to people saying like, hey, who's this chick? She's scrappy, she's smart, she seems to want to give back. So then I joined the board of the local chapter of ATD. And that network absolutely led to almost all of my job referrals and several interviews in that first, kind of like Sabina was saying, maybe 6 to 9 months when I first got back to living in the US. And, not all of them turned into jobs, but then I got cold contacted on LinkedIn where somebody saw, hey, I see you have teaching and English experience and you're on the ATD board. Well, we do learning and development programs for Boeing's customers. So I ended up going to work for Boeing. They were both my client and my employer, my customer, client and employer. So we were contractors. And one thing that I will get transparent about, maybe I lived in China too long for anybody who's been to some of these countries where they talk about things like salary out of the gate, is I was actually lucky enough to be making well into the 6 figures very quickly as that contractor. I didn't have benefits or anything, but I think I grossed over 130 both years that I was with that contractor. And then that actually ended up leading to FTE jobs with Boeing, again, just sort of elevating my profile, giving back. I ended up co-founding a conference because I didn't have sort of the financial or employer benefit to go out and attend the big industry events. Good news, those are a lot more accessible now in COVID. I think that's actually one of the benefits. And if you come to my breakout room, maybe we could talk about some of those events. And I know people like Leslie Early and some of the other folks here could speak to those as well. But yeah, it kind of snowballed. And I think putting yourself out there, not being afraid to ask, some of the themes that we heard from Martin and Sabina definitely worked well for me as well. And unfortunately, I did end up getting laid off from Boeing. Learning and training is often one of the first things to go. So that is something to maybe be aware of. But, I think it's definitely a career worth pursuing. And I'm very confident that my network will lift me back up. And you're never unemployed, you are just self-employed. So those are some of my nuggets of wisdom. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Sharon.
Okay, we are back. And before we break into our whole group Q&A, I want to remind everybody that the next networking session, the next idea networking session is going to be Tuesday, May 4th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm still working on the speakers for that. So as soon as I have that squared away, I will make that available to you too. And I'm going to drop into the chat, I'm going to drop the feedback form if you'd like to give me feedback on today. And I'll also put that mailing list link again, so you have that. And I'll just open it up for questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and I'll try to figure out who's talking and then I'll spotlight you.
So I guess a question that I might have for the group is, you know, as a teacher, I don't necessarily have a portfolio built and ready to go. And I need a job for next year, and I'm not brave enough to quit my teaching job to, you know, like put all my eggs in one basket sort of thing. So do you guys think that, like, you know, oh, hey, I had a portfolio ready to go within a couple months, and then it was just apply, apply, apply? Or did you guys like kind of build a portfolio like over a year or something? Because that's kind of what I'm tentatively planning on doing, is like using my breaks over the next teaching year to build a portfolio and try like the 30-day free trials and everything like that, and then try and get an instructional design job the following year. Do you think it's doable to build a portfolio in like 2 months, or kind of like, does anybody have feedback on that?
Yeah, who would, Martin? Yeah, I'll spotlight you, Martin.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to answer this one because I am still revamping my portfolio, and all the time. I came up with one, and when I went back to look at it, I found my very first portfolio the other day, and I went back and looked at it, and I laughed. Oh, I laughed so much. It was hilarious on how horrible it was. But what I did was I created, you know, a few of the modules from my from teaching, and I put those in there, and then I would do a new one. And then I was like, oh, this is better. And so I would replace one. And then a new idea came up and I was like, oh, let me do this. And then, you know, I'd experiment with something else, and that replaced another one. And I literally am still going through there, and I'm like, oh, I like this one that I did, and replace them and swap them out. The other thing that I really want everybody to understand is, for a portfolio, you do not need a 100% complete project or a module to put into a portfolio. They are not looking to make sure that you can do every aspect or from beginning to the end on the portfolio. You may want to just highlight one area. Look at how I did this animation. Look at how I did this, you know, transition. Look at how I did this question or this assessment. You do not have to have a full module in your portfolio. Just take highlights.
I'm seeing a question in the chat. How do you deal with a difficult, nasty SME at your jobs? And for those who are like, what's a SME? A SME is a subject matter expert. I'll say before, I'll just jump in with this one. Usually I let them drive the conversation. What are you trying to do? Oh, that's interesting, you know, and ultimately, you know, the SMEs that I work with are faculty members, and I'm like, I'll give you my opinion as nicely as I can, but you get to make the call. And then when the video turns out not quite how you thought it was going to be, like, oh, they didn't watch the whole 50-minute video. Really? Oh, that's so interesting. Maybe it should have been 10 minutes, you know, or whatever. I let them make the decisions. Adarsha, I think is the name. If you had anything more specific to ask, you know, definitely feel free to say. A lot of people saying their e-portfolios are a work in progress. I can also say that I didn't have an e-portfolio. Oh, Erin's got her hand up. Erin, you want to talk?
Just back to the nasty SMEs. I mean, one of the things we talked about in our breakout room is kind of like like Leslie's really good at the developer side of things, and I really like the client-facing side of things. So ideally, you're in a setting where maybe you've got somebody who's sort of playing point on the project to sort of handle the client-facing stuff. If not, that's okay. You do have to wear both hats, but where do you want to spend your time and energy? I think the pandemic has also underscored that for us. Like, where do you want to spend? Where do you want to burn calories? Where do you want to? Do you want to do it with nasty, difficult people and nasty, difficult relationships, or kind of like Sharon said, just minimum? We talk about this a little bit in my world, like the minimum viable product where you're like, I'm going to do exactly what you told me to do, maybe a little bit spruced up. It's not the platinum solution. And you put it in front of them and you get their feedback early on, and you can ask questions like, hey, do we want to put this in front of some learners to do some early pilot testing? And then they get the feedback directly from them, like, this is terrible or whatever. Then you don't even have to, be the mouthpiece of kind of what that scenario Sharon was describing. You can find other ways to get them that feedback. And when in doubt, hopefully you are working on a team or in an organization where maybe you can tag team things. I'm a big fan of never walk into a meeting alone. And if you can, bring in like a technical person and a people person, because you hear different things, you hear different nuances. Like I've had scenarios where one client decided to completely leave the firm that they were with to go direct to the supplier. And because it was only kind of the technical people in the room, they sort of didn't pick up on those cues. And so it was a big deal when this client decided to leave, and it's because just the right people weren't in the room. So maybe hash that out, or maybe it's a question even as you're interviewing, like, tell me about your teams. How do you comprise them? Who works on these teams? What's their role? What's the expectation of those roles?
Something Sabina said earlier, she said that she figured out how to talk about what she did using the words that they wanted to hear. And I think that that's a really important lesson, because as educators, you are doing the work that they're asking you to do as an instructional designer or a learning and development person. You just need to have the vocabulary to talk about it. Instead of students, you have, employees or learners. Instead of, I still want to say like learning outcomes. It might be objectives, there's just different ways of talking about it within learning and development. Other questions?
And even better if you can tie those learning outcomes to business outcomes.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, show how it's going to be beneficial to their business. Yeah, awesome.
Well, and this is Sabina, Erin, kind of piggybacking off of that too, like making it measurable. So design training that impacted 200 learners or whatever, like giving the metrics where possible. And I still personally struggle with that. But when I look at examples of resumes that I eventually want mine to look like, I really see a lot of those measurable outcomes included. And it strengthens the argument for why they should hire you, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see.
And that I like that Sabina said that, because that's even again a way to kind of think creatively about your history to date. Is have you shepherded some projects, even if the cohorts were not adults? What was the intervention? How many people were impacted? How delighted were the customers or the end users, i.e. parents or the learners themselves at whatever age? Try and spin it into business speak, and I delivered at scale, XYZ, on time, under budget, looking at those things. And what are you doing even in volunteer capacities for teaching development? Are you delivering anything to your colleagues? If so, are you measuring, even just in some interviews or surveys afterwards, how delighted were they, so that you can sort of speak to your success on that as you're crafting your new resume.
I'm gonna call it. Well, thank you everybody again for another great networking session. I always like learning from you. I want to thank Martin and Sabina and Erin for being our guest speakers today and sharing their experiences. I hope that I see some, if not all of you, back here on Tuesday, May 4th, 7 to 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Maybe I can answer a question, maybe I can't. I'm always honest about it. All right, I'll see you next time, guys. Thank you so much for coming.